people know a bit about your Sweet Lucy?
Oh, Sweet Lucy. I got to put my glass down to do Sweet Lucy.
Well, I'll keep mine up.
All right. Sweet Lucy is, in fact, our #1 selling product. It is a wonderful product.
Glad I asked.
It is essentially a bourbon-based liqueur, kind of on the order of, the person who described it first said, this kind of tastes like Grand Marnier with a bourbon base. And I said, that's a good description. But rather than that strong orange flavor, we also tamp that orange down with a little bit of apricot. So Sweet Lucy is essentially an apricot orange bourbon-based liqueur. But we didn't invent that name. That name has been around for 100 years or more. You're a duck hunter. You go out to the duck blind and you sitting there and it's freezing cold and the ducks fly over and boom, boom, you shoot the ducks down and you send your dog out to harvest your ducks, and while you're waiting for the dog to bring your duck back, you open up your jacket and you get a little flask and you get a hit. Sweet Lucy. That's the name. Sweet Lucy is in fact an exclamation of joy. And you've celebrated the hunt and you have bagged your duck and you can now reward yourself with a little sip of Sweet Lucy.
The question remains though, why do you have to wait until the dog is away? You're afraid of the dog watching you having a bit of it?
Well, you don't want to get the dog drunk.
You know, down in Tennessee, these things may happen, so... This is absolutely lovely. I understand your point about that brandy-esque rum. Mm-hmm. But what's the secret behind it then? Because you're using American white oak.
Well, it's odd that you ask that, because this rum is kind of it appeals to a wider variety of people. We quite often will, people will say to me, well, I don't like rum. Well, at that point, I hide the bottle from them and I say, well, I have a nice brandy here. Or if I happen to be in bourbon country, I'll say, I've got a nice whiskey. In fact, we did a tasting with some lawyers in Nashville one night, and we had it in we put the bottle in a brown paper sack. And the odd thing was, we didn't tell the lawyers what it was, but when the night was over, the Scotch drinkers in the bunch thought that we had a nice single malt Scotch. The bourbon drinkers were swearing that this was a good single barrel bourbon. And when I pulled the bottle out of the sack and showed them that it was rum, they were all very taken aback. But that's...
Well, I think it's quite amazing, because to me it reminds me of a traditional American whiskey on the maturation side, on the wood extracts. I can tell. Well, I can imagine it's that American white oak.
Yeah.
But then there is an old cognac or tamed Armagnac kind of thing there, and you can catch the rum.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of everything. It's a cross category.
Yeah. Well, my Scotch drinking wife, she prefers this nice rum
to. You revealed that about you. That's all right. You have to assume.
Yeah. So I used to have a little poem. I can't put it together right now, but I used to say, bourbon drinkers like their bourbon because it's sweet. Scotch drinkers like their Scotch because it's not sweet. And never the twain shall meet. And then this little poem goes on about our fine rum is truly the middle of the road. And so it is a nice peacemaker between husband and wife that have different tastes for spirits.
Well, hopefully you don't argue too much about the end product that the company is making. Yeah. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining us today.
Are we going to have a little taste of bourbon?
We should.
Let's have a little taste of bourbon.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say let's get serious, because obviously the caliber of the rums that we just tasted brought it up to that serious point. But this is bourbon, and not just your random bourbon.
No. This bourbon has won awards from... I kind of like to brag.
Well, it's all right. You can do so.
We entered a competition here in New York, and essentially, Flavian, you're going to taste the second best bourbon in the world. The competition included over 30 of this country's nice bourbons, and in a blind tasting, the panel chose our rum with a score of 95, and I thought that was pretty impressive for a young distillery out of Tennessee making a bourbon that really deserves to be tasted. as I said, you'll find out it tastes expensive. It's a little bit expensive. So-
Well, hold on. Let's put things in perspective
yeah,
here.
yeah,
When you like a good whiskey, what is expensive?
yeah.
If it's under $80, is it expensive?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. You are under $80.
yeah.
You're well under $80.
Yes, sir.
And therefore, now maybe for bourbon, it's a bit more than your random
Yep.
bourbons, but it's rich.
Thank you. Appreciate that. You know, I always like to say, if the object is to go from point A to point B, you can do it in a smart car. If you want to enjoy the trip, you might want to do it in a little bigger car. And that's the way our bourbon. It has a big flavor, and it'll take you down the road.
Now be careful with, with your comparisons here, because this is New York City.
Oh, yes.
And I see a lot more of those smart cars out there now.
Bless my heart. Anyway, cheers.
Cheers.
Come down and see us sometime.
You know, when in the old days, you thought that bourbon had that spank and that kick and all this. Well, it's not true anymore.
Yeah.
It can be rich without hurting you.
Yeah. And,
That's-
and even at 90 proof.
And
This is
I
very,
don't feel it.
very sippable. Nice.
I don't feel it.
Yeah.
And it's close to 9 in the morning.
Yeah. 5 o'clock somewhere, maybe in Europe.